Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of CISO Talks. I'm joined here today with Jack Naglieri, who is the founder and CEO of Panther Labs. Great to have you here today, Jack.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, or actually good evening for you. You're
Yeah,
a couple hours
it's
ahead of me.
just a few. So, Jack, would you be able to start with telling us a little bit about Panther Labs and what it is you guys actually do over there?
Yeah, sounds great. So Panther is a cybersecurity company that I founded out here in Silicon Valley back in 2018 after working as a practitioner for about 10 years doing a combination of incident response, forensics, just high scale logging and things like that. And throughout that time as a practitioner, I always noticed that the tooling that we had for doing things with this data, like analyzing it, like investigating breaches or just looking back in time to understand patterns of behavior, those systems were always very difficult to run. I mean, they're SIMs. Everyone's familiar with SIMs. Everyone needs a SIM because they have to put their security data somewhere. And everyone knows the challenges with them as well, right? They're very difficult to operate at scale. They're typically pretty slow. But I think most importantly, there's not a whole lot of primitives around security workflows built into them because they were never purpose built for doing security monitoring. They were built for general log analytics solutions. So during that time, as a practitioner, myself and others that I had worked with at Yahoo and both Airbnb, we ended up building custom solutions because there was just nothing ever built for this. So when I joined Airbnb in 2016, I started as a security engineer and we built this open source tool called StreamAlert. And StreamAlert was really purpose built for security. And it was a cloud native data analysis framework is how we called it. And it worked by using cloud native tech and detections as code and a lot of these things that led into Panther. So it became really popular in the community. It had like over 2,500 GitHub stars, and some of the biggest tech companies out here in the valley were using it. And in addition to that, like hundreds of other companies around the world were using it. And when I started Panther, I just wanted to dedicate myself more to that idea of, hey, let's build a cloud native security analytics platform. I don't like to call it a SIM because I think a SIM is very a limiting term in my mind. But security analytics as a platform, I feel like is really where this has to go. And really our whole thing is speed, scale, flexibility. Speed in that we get real-time alerts. We have really fast queries because we're built on a data lake. Scale, which is also, a corollary to that, which is we're able to take in as much data as we want because we're built on security data lakes and we're built on, really structured, compressed data. And then flexibility, which also sort of leads from scale, which is that we have detections as code for interfacing with our data. We have SQL. We can do really strong analytics on the data. And because it's so structured, it's just a really strong base for us to do all sorts of other things. If we want to do automation, so if we want to feed into our own team's internal workflows and things like that, or if we want to hook into a tool like Tines, we have that flexibility as well because we do so much around structured data and using detection as code to really filter out the things we care about before taking an action. And really, it's just this idea of building something that is purpose built for security, has these security workflows, and deals with solving a lot of the problems that we face as practitioners.
No, absolutely. It's it's a great insight into where you come from. I'm particularly interested. You talked about building Airbnb's open source platform, StreamAlert. And I think it would be great if we could get some insight into maybe some of the lessons that you learned from your time at Airbnb that led you to, or kind of drove you to where you are today with Panther Labs. I mean, I'm sure there was a wealth of experience you got there. So yeah, it'd be great if you could share some of that information with us.
Yeah, I think working in Airbnb was incredible overall. I I loved that company. I still do love that company. I think that it was such an incredible group of engineers, so many smart people around us all the time. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about managing security tooling. I learned a lot about scale from Airbnb. I think there's a couple things that I learned like while we were building Stream Alert and then, why I wanted to take those lessons into Panther. I mean, the first one I learned is security teams need like a really like enterprise grade version of this. And Streamlit was all command line. And I think it still is all command line. And that works. It works decently. But when you have people who are on your team who have just never had that experience of using Amazon or writing Python, and they're not as savvy on the command line, it's going to be really hard for them. It's going to be a pretty big barrier to entry. So that was always the thing in my mind where I was like, okay, if I were to rebuild this again, I would want to do it with a user interface, and I'd want a way to write Python in the browser, which is what you can do in Panther, which is pretty amazing. So that was one of the first things. And then the second thing was really the scale element. We realized the limits scale wise of that platform fairly early on. And, hindsight's always 2020. You build something and then you got to iterate. But I think once you kind of hit a critical mass of like how much you've invested in something, it's very hard to shift it. So it was really non-trivial for us to be like, oh, let's just like rip out these components. Let's rewrite these things in a different language. Let's, use a different data backend. There's all these things that you just don't have time to do because, being on the inside as a security team, it's not your primary job to write tools. Your primary job is to do incident response. Your primary job is to work with other teams in the company, get the data that you need so you have the right level of visibility so you know when things go wrong. So that's a full-time job. And
Absolutely.
You have to kind of accept that. Like, you're never going to be able to write an enterprise grade tool. So, that was something else that I was always very aware of. Like, there was always going to be these like tech debt things that existed that we just have to deal with. And then just operating at scale like that's probably the biggest lesson I ever learned from working at both Airbnb and at Yahoo. More so at Yahoo, actually, because Yahoo was probably 10x or 20x the size of Airbnb's infra. And when I got to Airbnb, I saw like the amount of systems they had, and I was like, oh wow, that's like one little product of Yahoo is like this entire company. This is gonna be fun. This will be easy because I've already done this for multiple years.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I think it's really just understanding that most security teams don't have time to do this, and it's totally infeasible to expect that all teams should go build this. And that's actually a pattern that I had seen, right? Like, I had a choice when I was, probably 2 years into Airbnb. I was like, do I want to stay here? Do I want to join another company, or do I want to start a company? And obviously I really wanted to start a company, but it's really hard when you're just an engineer and you don't know anything about startups or, how to really build something. And then, I could have joined a company like Coinbase or Stripe or whoever else, but I would have just ended up rebuilding the same thing. And I'm like, there's just this pattern it's such an anti-pattern, and that I see that exists. And it'd be really great to just build one platform that everyone uses. And now, it's several years later, and Coinbase actually is a user of Panther, which I'm really happy and proud of. Because they're a really sophisticated team, and they do technology really, really well just as a company. So it makes me really happy and proud for that. But yeah, there's certainly a lot just around scale that I think was the biggest thing that I learned, and just trying to come up with a good thesis for how I would want to build a company around this.